Hi guys, welcome back to B's Speed Shop. So today I'm going to be continuing work on this lower door jamb and outer sill section. So the first thing I want to get done is this cut along the edge of the floor that I put in. I got a little bit more just to trim off the middle of that, and then I can start welding that back together. So the reason I put this cut in along this edge was when I put the outer sill on, it was lining up with this edge, but there was a gap along here where the two seams were meeting up. So just putting that cut in, it's increased the angle of this a little bit and brought this corner down, and now these two edges meet up quite nicely. There's a slight gap, but once it's clamped together and spot welded, it should be fine. So I've got a little bit more off this, just this middle section just along here. I just got to grind the very top off of that so I can then line them up and weld them back together.
So I've got my seam along this edge all cleaned up now. So what I'm going to do is about every inch I'm just going to put a tack, and then I'm going to come back and put another tack in between those tacks and just slowly build it up. And when I get to a certain point I'll grind it back so I can see the gaps and come back and fill those in.
So I've got my first lot of tack welds done all the way along this seam now. So I'm just going to give it a couple of minutes just to cool off, and then I'll come back and do some more tacks in between each of these and just slowly build it up. I did just test fit my outer sill and that fits on really nice. There's no gap along this edge, there's a tiny little gap along this edge, but once I get a few spot welds in it should close up, and it's just catching on the corner there, so I just need to grind a little bit off that corner and it will sit nice and flush just there. So I'm really happy about that. So I'm going to continue on with this, get my next lot of tacks in, slowly build it up, and I'll just grind it back down. So I've just about finished welding up this seam along this edge now, and I've started to grind it back as well. So there may be one or two little pinholes which I need to come back and fill. Just put a little tack weld in there to fill those up. But I'm happy with how this has gone today, and just test fitted the outer sill and that fits on quite nicely. There's no gap along here, tiny little gap along this edge, but once it's all spot welded together that should close up quite nicely. So I've got to finish doing a little bit of grinding and cleaning up, and then I can rust treat it and spray it with some weldable primer. Then I can start working on my outer sill and get that welded on as well. So I've got this edge rust treated and sprayed with some weldable primer now, so that's ready for the outer sill to be welded to. So what my plan is for today is to get the outer sill on, put a few tacks along this edge and a few tacks along this edge to hold it in place, And then what I want to do is I want to finish removing this rear quarter panel section, because my new one got delivered this week. So what I'd like to do is clamp that into position so that I know all of these seams here all line up on this corner, and then from there I can finish welding in the doorstep and outer sill, and then if there's time I can start getting my rear quarter panel ready to be welded in. So obviously I've got to drill some holes along the edges for some spot welds, and then just spray it with some weldable primer, and then once that's clamped into place I can get that tacked in. But main aim for today is to get the outer sill tacked on and get this corner here all lined up. So I'm going to start working on that now. I've tacked in my outer sill now along the edge against the floor, and this seam along the doorstep. I put in a few tack welds along the edge of the doorstep and the floor where those spot welds are. I've just put a couple in for now. So what I want to focus on now is removing the rest of this rear quarter panel and just clamp my new one into place for now, so I can line up this corner here and make sure this edge lines up as well. And once I'm happy with that, I'll probably just leave the quarter panel clamped into place and I'll finish welding in the outer sill and the doorstep. I've got my old rear quarter panel section removed now. That was a little bit tricky because what they'd done on a previous repair is cut along the edge of the guttering and up the seam there, and rather than grinding the spot welds out, they left the guttering in and that piece of the seam up there and welded the new panel on top. So there was 2 layers of guttering along the top edge, and there was an extra piece of metal in between the seam up there. So I had to carefully grind all of the spot welds back to remove those, and that took a little bit of time to do. But I've got my new panel in and clamped at the moment. I just wanted to test fit all the edges to make sure it all lined up. There is a bit of a gap down all the way down this edge, so I need to, well, the top corner isn't too bad just there, but from about there up there's a gap, so I need to figure out what I need to do to close up that gap. Around the rear wheel arch, it needs a little bit of work because it's sort of binding the edge of the wheel arch and the quarter panel want to be in the same place. So I think what I need to do is a little bit of a repair job on the edge of this wheel arch piece and sort of remake this edge, because this still needs to go in a bit. I don't know if you can see, but it's like sticking out. The edge of this should be more in here somewhere, so I need to fix this edge so this lines up properly, and at the same time I need to fix this corner so that edge there will tuck in. But other than that, there's a little bit of a gap down this back edge, but once there's a few clamps on it, it closes up. So I'm hoping that's not going to be an issue, and I'll get a few spot welds and that should close up that gap quite nicely. But other than that, this was the edge I was focusing on, and it all lines up quite nicely. There's no gaps along there. So what I need to do now is that top rail, I need to fix the edge along there on the inside, and on the inside of here there's another rail piece on the inside here that I need to fix because that's sort of rusted out as well. You can just about see it on the other side. There's that bottom window rail piece that needs fixing on this side. So I think to actually make those parts I could just buy a replacement part and weld in. So I didn't get quite as far as I was hoping I would this weekend, but I've still made some progress. I've got my lower door step half welded in, I've got my outer sill tacked in a position that I'm happy with, and I've also got my new rear quarter panel just clamped into position for a test fit now. So luckily next weekend is a long weekend because of the bank holiday. So what I'm going to do is finish welding in my doorstep, get my outer sill welded on, and I'm going to start work on getting my new rear quarter panel fitting properly and hopefully get that ready to be welded in as well. So I will be leaving this video here for now, so thanks for watching.